Welcome to the Carroll County Board of Education Candidate Forum presented by the Carroll County Student Government Association. My name is Nikki Zhang. I am the president of CCSGA and one of your moderators for the evening. Emily Tedeschi, the student representative on the Board of Education, will also be the moderator this evening. The 6 candidates for the Board of Education were invited, and I'd like to thank Dr. Joskowski, Mr. Whistler, Mr. Scanlon, Dr. Dorsey, Mrs. Battaglia, and Mr. Miller for taking the time out of their busy schedules to attend. Finally, I would like to thank all of the students and public for attending tonight's forum.
On November 8th, voters of Carroll County will have to elect 3 out of the 6 candidates running to serve for a 4-year term on the Board of Education. CCSGA hopes this forum can provide an opportunity for the public to get to know the candidates before casting their ballot. Before we begin tonight's forum, we ask those in attendance to please remain silent and refrain from making comments regarding the candidates' positions on the topics. At this time, please silence your cell phones and all other electronic devices.
We will now begin tonight's forum. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to introduce themselves and give an opening statement. We will start with Mrs. Battaglia.
Thank you guys for having this forum. I think it's incredible that our students are absolutely engaged in what is happening currently with the election. So I thank you again. My name is Tyra Battaglia, and I am currently seeking re-election for Carroll County Board of Education. The past 4 years have definitely been a challenge regarding COVID and some other entities of funding and difficulties that everyone has faced. Having this position has been extremely humbling. It's a learning experience. And it's something I will always cherish, and I will always be very proud that I did this. I'm a parent. I'm a mom of 3 kids. I don't have a fancy degree. I'm currently in college, and I'm working on that, so I'm a late life learner. And everything that I learn for my psychology major, I use with many of the decisions that I've had to make. COVID was particularly one of them. Discussions regarding isolation and what they do to children, I brought that to the table, as those were a lot of the concerns that I had as a mom, and I was hearing from the community as well. One of my biggest things is making sure parents have a voice at the table. Carroll County is strong in its ag heritage, its historical significance. We do want to make sure we are making room for growth and for new families. And we want to make sure we're adjusting to making sure those families and everyone feels welcome. And that's something everyone needs to work on. But we also need to make sure that everything is appropriate for our schools and for our kids and moving forward as the county grows. I still have my 3 goals that I did 4 years ago, and I'm expanding on them, which is 1, keeping our communities together. A lot of that currently is in play regarding the redistricting in South Carroll area, and we're waiting on the feasibility study. Drug education here in Carroll County, we still have an opiate problem, so I just want to continue to making sure we are educating the community and our children, and working on consistency in the curriculum, which we're currently doing with expanding our virtual classes, which COVID did bring a good side to that, so our students can receive foreign languages from one high school to another. So I look forward to this evening's forum, and thank you all for inviting us.
Thank you, Ms. Battaglia. Dr. Dorsey?
Good evening. My name is Dr. Patricia Ann Dorsey, and it's certainly a privilege to participate in tonight's forum being hosted by the Carroll County Student Government Association. Many thanks to Nikki Zhang, President of the Carroll County Student Government Association, and to Emily Tedeschi, Student Representative on our Board of Education. I also would like to thank our timekeeper for tonight, our audience that's in attendance, and those watching live stream. I also thank my fellow candidates for your interest in our school system and the students we serve. I currently am a member of the Board of Education and am seeking re-election to serve a second term. During my time on the board, my education and career experiences have prepared me to serve. I received a Bachelor of Science degree from Morgan State College, now Morgan State University, a master's degree from Western Maryland College, which is now McDaniel College, and a Doctor of Education degree from the University of Maryland, College Park. My teaching career began here in Carroll County as a third grade classroom teacher at William Winchester Elementary School and continued at Westminster Elementary School, where I was the team leader for grade 3. I later served as a Title I resource teacher and was responsible for providing professional development to our Title I staff. My career continued as an assistant principal at Eldersburg Elementary School and then principal of Tawnytown, William Winchester, and Friendship Valley Elementary Schools. My entire 39-year career was in Carroll County Public Schools. During my first term on the board, I have gained additional experience by serving on the 2021 and 2022 Board of Directors for our Maryland Association of Boards of Education, known as MABE. I have been a member of MABE's Budget Committee, Conference Program Committee, and Equity Committee. During my first term, I've also had the privilege of meeting with various student groups in Carroll County. I've met with multicultural groups at Robert Moton, Sykesville Middle, Northwest Middle, Francis Scott Key High School, and Westminster High School. And I've also attended cultural events at Mount Airy Elementary School. Additionally, I've participated in mock interviews at the Career and Technology Center, and I've made presentations to the Teacher Academy classes. I've celebrated the accomplishments of students by attending ceremonies at the Career and Technology Center and our high school graduations. I look forward to discussing the important issues that are raised by students at our forum this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. Dr. Jaskowski.
Excuse me. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Dr. Amanda Jaskowski. First, I wanted to thank you, Emily and Nikki, and all the students who submitted questions and helped prepare tonight's important event. You're already taking the first step in taking a leadership role to serve not only your school, but your county and your community, and I'm honored to take your questions tonight and speak before you. I'm a mother of 3. I'm also an active volunteer in our local schools, and I'm an occupational therapist serving children and youth by training. I'm now a professor of occupational therapy at Towson University, and so in my full-time position at Towson, I teach research and clinical courses to help prepare future healthcare practitioners, and I serve in an executive leadership position as the program director of the Masters of Science in Occupational Therapy. One of the things I'm most proud of in my academic record is the fact that 95% of my publications include student mentorship as authors. And because my experience and my engagement with students is so important to me. I interact with students on a day-to-day basis as an educator, but also I learn from them. I learn everything from what song I should be listening to what makes an orientation activity fun or boring, to their thoughts and concerns and feelings about really critical topics that affect their everyday lives. And I take all of this information in, and it helps me to serve them better as a teacher and as a community member. And that's why I value so much this dialogue with you all. I think in a time of national upset and global crisis, our pathos, or feelings, have taken a front seat, when instead it's our ethos or our ethics that should guide our conversation. I'd like to lower the political temperature of our community, and I want you to vote for me for a seat on the board because I genuinely want to help. I care about the success of our school system. I'm prepared to lead it. I bring experience that relates to many facets of the school system, and I'm eager to learn about and to partner with experts in other areas, including students. If elected to the board, I will support all students to get what they need to learn in a safe and positive environment. I will invest in all educators and school system employees, and I will advocate for excellence. This includes implementation of the blueprint, thinking thoughtfully about redistricting and infrastructure decisions and planning for development in our communities, maintaining high standards for academic programs, and increasing access to education, extracurriculars, and job skills trainings for all students.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Jaskowski. Mr. Miller?
Thank you. Just like the three before me said, I'd like to thank Nikki and Emily and the Student Government Association as well for hosting this event. I think it's great. I was a Student Government Association member at Liberty High School but unfortunately, I didn't overlap an election year and didn't get to have a great event like this. So thank you. James Miller. I was raised in Carroll County. I was a Liberty High School graduate in 2001. Currently have a family of 3 daughters, and we reside in Carroll County as well. Moved my family back here for one main reason: the public school system in Carroll County. I've said it before, and I've said it probably many times. We have, I believe, the best public school system in the state of Maryland, and I would put us up against anybody, our teachers and our schools, against any county in the state. With that being said, we have work to do. You know, I coach sports. I was a Liberty High School baseball coach. I coach Sykesville Raiders football. I have 3 daughters in the lacrosse program. I'm the vice president of the rec council up in North Carroll, and I'm the president of the North Carroll girls lacrosse program. And even though we have great teams, even though we like to believe we're the best, doesn't mean you stop practicing. The same goes with our school system. We have the best school system, but we still have work to do. With that being said, the blueprint's coming up. My background's in finance. I have an MBA from Loyola. I have an undergraduate in economics from UMBC. And I've been in the finance sector and healthcare my entire career. When we look at the blueprint and what it does for Carroll County and the funding, the proposed funding, it's not as great as other counties due to how our success. It's based off your success of your county, so our funding may not be as good as other counties. However, we're still going to be expected to provide the salaries, the pay, and everything else that comes with the blueprint for our teachers. That's where my background comes in finance. I hope that we can work together with our county commissioners to find the funding, the gaps that may be there to pay our teachers, and essentially implement the blueprint as we're going to need to. With that said, I was also in Oklahoma Road in 8th grade. I was actually in Sykesville when Oklahoma Road opened halfway through the year, and I got moved to a new middle school halfway through the year in 8th grade. So I fully understand some of the students' hesitations and reservations with what's going on in the southern end of the district. I was a part of it back in 8th grade. I will say, as an 8th grader, when I moved to Oklahoma Middle School, it was a new school. It wasn't really ready, and it was probably the best half of an 8th grade year an 8th grader can ask for, because it was really fun. But with that said, I understand. I understand the students, and I understand what they're feeling and how it's going to impact them if redistricting occurs. So I come with that experience as a student, but also as a parent. With that said, I only have 10 seconds left, so thank you. Look forward to the questions, and I really appreciate your interest in the election this year.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Scanlon?
And thank you for organizing this first forum. It's exciting to see students who are invested in their education and in their future. Very briefly, my name is Tom Scanlon. I was a career educator here in Carroll County for 33 years. I was a reading specialist and an English teacher, first at North Carroll High School and then at Westminster High. I am also ESOL certified. I advised our literary magazine and co-advised the drama club at North Carroll. Now, I bring that up because I know how important extracurriculars are for students. And for me, it was the arts. I'm a musician, I write, I did some theater back in the day. But as a drama club advisor in a school setting, I saw how actors, musicians, singers, and dancers all worked together to create an exciting production. And I was in charge of the tech crews. And these are the people that students have specific skills. They don't necessarily want to be the center of attention, but they fill important roles behind the scenes. The lesson I saw unfold time and time again is that every person is important when building a team. No matter how small it may seem, every job is an essential part of success. And you see those same dynamics unfold with athletics. Not everyone wants to be the athlete who is competing. Some want to be on the support crew who keeps the whole thing going. So we need that solid foundation. The same is true for a school to be successful. We need everybody involved, building school spirit and building a culture of kindness from the Board of Education on down. Now, I was a parent of 4 young men who went through Carroll County schools, and I've lived here for over 30 years, so I know Carroll County, and I know our schools. Now, I have 3 priorities for our Board of Education. First, I want to focus on you, our students, to be sure you're getting the best education possible. Number 2, we can't do that without a highly qualified staff, so we do need competitive salaries and a supportive work environment. And finally, our schools are community centers where families can come together to celebrate their kids, their schools, and their neighborhoods. Now, I mentioned the arts, and especially kindness, because I want you to know who I am as a person. My resume is not nearly as important as my values. We want you to be college and career ready, of course, but that's not the whole picture. Honesty, integrity, compassion, empathy, responsibility, perseverance, these all have to go into the mix of who you are as a person. These traits will help you be successful in life. And don't forget to have some fun along the way. And that is important too. Not only all of you are able to vote in November, but I thank you for being here and being involved in your education and our future.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Whistler?
Thank you so much. I really, again, to echo everyone else, thanks so much to the Student Government Association for their hard work. It's so important that voters get to know the candidates and their values. As for me, I'm a parent. I have 4 children, one of which still attends Carroll County Public Schools at Oklahoma Road Middle as a 7th grader. My wife, Jennifer, she's a North Carroll High graduate, and she convinced me to move out here in 2014, and there's a reason why people love this county. We have great schools, and I'm running to make sure we keep it that way. I'm a retired naval officer. I served 10 years in the enlisted community and another 10 years as an officer. As a Persian Farsi linguist, I earned the Air Medal and Combat Action Ribbon after accumulating over 750 flight hours, 200 of which were under combat conditions. I know what it means to serve, make tough decisions, and create backup plans as we prepare for the unexpected. And our county has seen a lot of unexpected things the last 4 years. I will ensure we focus on our core mission of educating students and giving staff what they need to be successful. I'm also an experienced business leader. I served as a senior executive for many nonprofits and for-profit organizations in the Baltimore, D.C. region. I've served as Maryland's largest credit union's board director, managing over a $2 billion assets and one of the largest employers in the state. I've negotiated employer group contracts. I've done a lot of the things that our Board of Education is responsible for doing, managing large budgets, managing the county's largest employer, and I think I have the skills needed to help make sure that we keep Carroll County Public Schools the best in the state. I'm also a certified teacher. My credentials do expire at the end of the year, and I left the classroom in 2018 after serving 4 years as a full-time educator and nearly 5 more as a substitute, primarily in Baltimore County. I definitely know the challenges facing our teachers, and I'll make sure they get the resources they need to care for our kids. As for my background and my education, I've completed all of my doctoral coursework at University of Phoenix. I've received a Master's of Science degree in Troy State University in Management. I've completed almost all of the courses required for a Master's of Science in Education in Johns Hopkins School of Education, although I dropped that pursuit after I left teaching in 2018. I have a bachelor's degree from Excelsior College in Sociology, and I earned an AA in General Studies at Catonsville Community College. So again, I think I have the resume needed for this job. I really want to make sure we focus on students, we focus on teachers, and we focus on making sure that we have everything we need to keep our school terrific, great, and positioned for the future. We have lots of challenges ahead, and I would really appreciate your vote.
All right. Thank you. We will now move on to the question and answer portion of tonight's forum. Tonight's questions were created by the students of Carroll County Public Schools, and Emily and I will alternate reading. Each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond to a question, and your time will be kept on the monitor next to me.
We will start with Mrs. Battaglia. Each question will begin with the next person going down the line from left to right. The first speakers for 7 and 8 were picked at random, but the following speakers will follow the normal pattern of answering questions. Question 7 will begin with Mr. Miller. Question 8 will begin with Mr. Whistler. Our first question is, please explain the experiences you have that qualify you to be a Board of Education member and what steps you've taken to gain an understanding of the complexities of Carroll County Public Schools and its students.
Well, first experiences I've been there for 3.5 years now, going on 4. So I'm being a current board member is one big experience, I believe. Outside of being a board member, I work in the private sector for a small business in Carroll County. So I see what things students need to work on to understand real life. We do hear a lot, students don't know they rely constantly on a calculator. So not knowing how to count back change. Sometimes it's using some equipment they don't understand how to use that is technically outdated. So a lot of those things are really important to have is more real life experience. You can prepare anybody for anything for college, but having to actually be out in the real world to understand a couple of things, that's something I think we definitely need to work on with our students. And even being a mom, you hear and see what your kids are going through, you hear what other kids are going through, so I think those things are extremely important to be in touch with current topics.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Dr. Dorsey?
As I shared my opening comments, I certainly talked about the experiences that I feel qualify me for being a board member. And again, nothing takes the place of being in the classroom and at the school level and being involved in our county of which we're serving, because again, Carroll County is unique in a number of ways. But again, I feel like I've got that grassroots training because I've been that boot on the ground, so to speak. I know what it's like to be in the classroom, working with students, working with parents, working with other colleagues, all aiming for a common vision and goal to make sure that we're educating our students. And then once I stepped out of the classroom, once I became a resource teacher, that too helped to qualify me to do what I'm doing now, because I certainly got a different perspective as I looked at working with staff members in different schools other than the ones in which I taught. So again, the experience with being a classroom teacher and the resource teacher have been helpful. Being an administrator, you get to see the entire curriculum from the K through 5, and that certainly is helpful. And as Mrs. Battaglia just mentioned, being a board member certainly too has helped with qualifying me for the job.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Jaskowski?
Sure. I think I bring a number of fresh ideas and perspectives, but also a wealth of interests and experiences that relate to service on the Board of Education. One of those is the fact that I'm an occupational therapist, so I have training in child development. I understand how children learn and grow. I understand how to support them and their families, the different types of accommodations that they might need to be able to be successful in the classroom and in the community. And I can work with educators and families to help get those things done. As a professor and a program director, part of my role is to be in charge of the accreditation process for my program. And so I am very familiar with educational standards, developing curriculum and modifying it in response to some of those national guideline changes, and doing program assessment and data collection and evaluation. I'm also serve on the university's budget committee, and so I help make difficult decisions relating to very large state-funded budgets for education and thinking about priorities. And, the fact that I am a parent of young children in the school system, I'm invested in this for the long term. I have immediately gotten involved in my local school communities. I do volunteering. I have chaired various PTA committees, and I just have wanted to do everything I can to contribute.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, and I appreciate this question. I get this a lot because I'm not an educator. I think I mentioned before my background is in finance, but I'm a parent of 3 daughters, and I volunteered in the community since graduating college. My nephew was a Sykesville Raiders football program, and I coached him right out of college. I coached at Liberty High School. I've been involved with our youth in the community through volunteering. With that said, on the Board of Education, it's not just about, the curriculum. There's a lot of difficult decisions. We talk about, teachers' pay. We talk about blueprint. A lot of people don't realize that Carroll County already spends 88% of its funding on salaries and benefits. So when we have to make hard decisions, there's not much room there. So my experience in finance and my background with working with tight budgets is going to be important as we move forward. One thing that I like to mention is I'm from Carroll County. I love this community. I grew up here, and like Dr. Jasowski said, I have a vested interest with 3 daughters in the school system. I do believe you need a diverse board. I believe that when you have everybody who comes from the same background, you tend to get a lot of groupthink. And that's not necessarily the best thing for our students, for our teachers, for our staff, and for our schools. But I appreciate the question because I get it a lot. So what have I done? I've reached out to teachers. Teachers have come to me. I've talked to them about what's going on in our schools. I've talked about how we can help as a Board of Education. I've tried to learn through discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scanlon?
Okay, thanks. So, as I said in my opening, I'm a career teacher in the county. So, I've worked with students from all academic levels. So, I do have an understanding of how each different academic level has different needs and different goals. I worked on several curriculum writing teams, so I have a pretty solid understanding of how the curriculum writing process goes. And I've also had several student teachers over the years, so that whole training of new teachers is very, very important, especially for Carroll. As we look at teacher shortages, we definitely need to encourage our young people to be teachers in the county. So I've worked with that as well. I guess the thing that really motivated me the most, though, is when I started realizing that I had students in 9th grade who could barely read on a kindergarten, 1st grade level. And so that's when I decided to become a reading specialist and, got my master's degree in that. So over the years, I have worked with students with reading deficiencies. About half of my students probably had IEPs, so I got very involved in the whole special education process. It seems like I was the go-to guy to go to the meetings. Whenever there was a meeting, I was the one who got the notice to go to the meeting. So I've sat through so many IEP meetings.
Thank you. Mr. Whistler?
Thank you so much. A lot of folks I talk to really have a misconception of what the Board of Education is and does. Many people think the Board of Education should be packed with former teachers, and honestly, it's a very important criteria that people on the board have a connection with education and understand the challenges facing the education system. But our Board of Education is responsible for executing hundreds of millions of dollars, half of the county budget. We're responsible for negotiating contracts with employer groups, setting the strategic direction of our county and our school system, interfacing with political officials to get resources and things we need for our schools. I'm the only candidate that is a certified teacher, a military veteran, led large organization, hundreds of thousands of people, over $2 billion of budgets. I'm only one of 3 candidates that's actually taught in Maryland public schools. And I've also served on a board of directors of Maryland's largest credit union. So I know what you're supposed to do as it relates to governing a large body. The Board of Education is charged with governing and supervising the superintendent and the senior staff, not dictating or directing the day-to-day operations in schools. I have that experience. I've also participated in the last redistricting process, which is painful, and I think I'll bring that experience to the table later on if elected. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, student expression is currently at the forefront of discussions as we are affected by school system policies and procedures. As a board member, what do you think the role of a student is, And how will you ensure that student rights and voices are protected and heard? This question will begin with Dr. Dorsey.
Okay. So the role of a student, I mean, certainly we appreciate the student voice, and I feel that your role is to make sure that the adults who are leading your educational process are aware of what your thoughts and your feelings are. So again, you need to make sure that you're sharing with the adults. In my communication with students, have learned the most about how students are feeling about things. I can remember being in a classroom just where I was talking about the role of school board members, and as the topics sort of got into the current topics that we were dealing with as a board, it was just very enlightening for me to hear that student perspective. So my feeling is that I really do think that the student voice is important, and we need to do all that we can to encourage it and to show that we're listening to it. You know, it's one thing to say that I want to hear your voice, but then if it's just going to fall on deaf ears and nothing is done concerning it, then that creates an issue. So I am very much interested in hearing comments from students concerning your lived experience, and just know that I will do all I can to take it from there. But thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jaskowski?
Thank you. Yes, I spoke in my opening also about the many ways in which my life has been enriched by my daily interactions with students, both in my personal life and my work, and just how much I value that voice. I myself served as a student representative to my state board of education in high school, which is what piqued my interest in becoming a member of the Board of Education later on in my career. That experience was so valuable because I learned so much about the kind of inner workings of the system, the different roles and responsibilities of various members of the board, as well as other civic leaders. And I think that student voices must be listened to and heard. We need to make sure that we are providing a space where students can feel comfortable sharing those thoughts and feelings as well, that they have someone to go to talk to and share their perspectives, and to make sure that one group is not prioritized over another. I think that there have been some recent decisions that have been hurtful and harmful for some groups of students, and I'd be very interested to think about ways to change those if elected to the board rather immediately. I think it's also important to make sure that students have representation on as many committees as possible, and I would advocate for student voting rights on the Board of Education, as well as increased participation in Board of Education activities. As far as, let's see, I think I answered that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Thank you. So first, I think when you ask what is a student's role, I think it's important for students to make sure that they find somebody within the school system they have confidence in, that they voice those opinions to. I remember being a high school coach for the high school baseball. I wasn't a teacher, so a lot of times I had students who would come to me. They found that they could confide in me and come to me with things that happened during the day, things that happened in the classroom, and they would come to me and voice their concerns. I will tell students to make sure that you're not too shy about it. Make sure teachers, make sure the Board of Education, write an email, a coach, find somebody that you have confidence in that you can share that perspective with. How can you ensure that students' rights and voices are protected and heard? I think Dr. Dorsey said, ultimately the decisions are being made at a board level or, maybe within a school. And I know students sometimes feel like it's not in their best interest. But sometimes experience of, being through those experiences as a child and then growing up and being in a school system, things tend to come full circle. And I think we try, and I believe our school systems try and our board tries to do what's best for our students. And it might not seem like that at the time, but hopefully, as you guys, I guess, get through your education, you realize that ultimately the goal is always to have your best interest in mind.
Thank you. Mr. Scanlon?
Okay, well, students are absolutely one of the major stakeholders in education, no question about it, and your voice is very important. In a school, the SGA has limited power, but they can be a very strong voice. And I would like to see that expanded, where the SGAs really can meet on a regular basis with administration and work on programs. And of course, there's the Spirit Week and all that stuff that SGA is involved with. Clubs and extracurriculars are also another great avenue. They are more informal, but that's where quite often a student and a teacher can have much more informal dialogue, and your voice gets heard and can be passed on that way. And finally, the student representative on the Board of Education is extremely important. I think we have seen that over the past couple of years, that the student voice gets heard at a Board of Education meeting. And I think that, like I said, is incredibly important. And like Dr. Jaskowski said, I would also support the student member having a vote on the Board of Education. I think it would be a great step for your voices to be heard loudly and clearly.
Thank you. Mr. Whistler?
Thank you very much. A student involvement in their education is key. I mean, you're the key stakeholder. You're the customer. So if you don't have a voice, it's meaningless. So it's extremely important to hear from students. It's very important, and the work of our student rep on the Board of Education is a vital link between the Board of Education managing the entire system and making sure that those ideas are conveyed. If elected to the board, I'd want to know how is the school environment? Is it clean? Is there adequate space for you to learn? Are the classrooms comfortable? Are you getting all the experiences you need in your K through 12 journey? Are you getting the necessary training and education you need to go to college or to pick a really meaningful tech or career choice if you decide not to go to college? Do we need to put more classes in our schools for ag? Do we need to focus more on STEM? Are we providing enough sporting events, activities? Are we meeting the bar with regards to clubs and giving you community service opportunities? But little things like class sizes. Are we giving students enough school rigor? What are the transportation issues like? Are there any transportation issues that we need to resolve? But students need to have a voice in all of these issues. Dress code. But I encourage students to use your parents to voice your concerns so that we know what you need and want.
Thank you. Mrs. Battaglia?
Absolutely. Students' voices do matter when it comes to topics and it comes to decisions that are made. And that's anywhere. That's not just Board of Ed. That's, also, as a parent, you might want to ask your child, how do you feel about this? And, you do want to take their opinions and their feelings into consideration. But we also need to do that within reason. We do need to prepare our children for the real world. You necessarily won't be going into a job and telling the job what they are going to change for you. That's something that we all need to kind of understand too, is we want our children and to definitely tell us how they feel, and we take things into consideration, but also that they can't just go in and feel that they can change things to fit them. And I know that's not the popular thing to say. We want to make sure our students and all students are prepared for the real world. I definitely want us to partner more with the SGA. If you guys can send the concerns to the president or the superintendent to get something on the agenda to discuss, whether it be the dress code or clubs that, need a little bit more help. Those type of things are important. And I think, instead of just a report, making sure those things are included on an agenda for the student rep to discuss. But definitely, we want schools to be welcoming to all, and all students should feel welcome in our schools.
Thank you. We will be moving into question 3. As legislative mandates have increased, funding has not increased accordingly. If elected, how will you work with the county and state government to prioritize funding, instruction, and facilities, along with supporting educational resources, in order to improve student academic performance? We will start with Dr. Jaskowski.
Thank you. Yes, this is a perennial issue in the schools, regardless of whether it's an election year or whether there's a big blueprint looming. Certainly funding and communication with our leaders is something that is always of interest to school boards. One of the things I've done to start is to meet with all of our commissioners to get a better sense of their relationship with the Board of Education, their role in relation to the board, and some ideas that they have to help improve lines of communication and priorities as we work together. I think that it's important to establish a good working relationship with our legislators and delegates so that we have a line of communication to those at the state level, and to make sure that we really have a clear vision for what we'd like to present when we are communicating with those leaders, so that we present as a united front and that we are really reflecting the values of the stakeholders. I think that it's important to also present with data and evidence to support any claims or priorities that we're making. So bring in assessment to the extent possible, evaluation of curriculum and learning outcomes so that we can show where changes need to be made and also where things are working well. And that will really help enhance any messaging that we have with our leaders.
Thank you, Dr. Jaskowski. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, thank you. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but a lot of people look at the Board of Education as the ultimate decision maker on how to spend funds, and that's absolutely 100% correct that we are the ultimate decision maker on our budget. However, as I mentioned before, 88% of that budget's already being spent on salaries and benefits, which leaves 12%, and that goes for facilities, maintenance, overhead, and other things that have to be paid for. So the most important thing is working with our commissioners. We have newly elected commissioners who I believe may put a larger value on education. If you actually go back and look through the last several years, the funding from the county to the Board of Education has actually decreased percentage-wise. The argument could be made that funding overall, tax dollars collected by the county, has gone up, so they didn't need to give as much to the schools. But I would disagree with that. I actually think as county funding comes in and increases, the schools should be prioritized. There's two things I believe we should pay for with our tax dollars, and that's education and public safety, education being number one. So I will work with our commissioners. I will ensure that we get the funding that's necessary to ensure Carroll County Public Schools has what they need to continue to be the best in the state. One thing I want to bring up, there's other ways outside of that. We got to get creative. I'm going to say this, and I know some things not popular, but we have an opportunity at several schools through donations and fundraising to put a turf field in. You go down in North Carroll and you look at Coppermine, they make a lot of money off renting out a turf field. If we can get one at one of our schools, there's an opportunity for us to maybe think of different ways to get funding for the schools.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Scanlon?
Yeah, as has been said already, this has been a perennial problem, issue, since as long as I've been in Carroll County schools, trying to fight for the funding. Most of the funding comes from the county commissioners, or the largest chunk, I should say, comes from the county commissioners. So we definitely have to have a good relationship with our commissioners. We have to communicate, as I said earlier, providing data for what we need, evidence for what we need, and so we need that dialogue continuously. Mr. Miller mentioned, education and public safety. So I understand where the commissioners are coming from. They have a sheriff's department, and now we have the EMS program getting started. Tax dollars are stretched thin, but it's our job to advocate for our schools, because that's where, as far as I'm concerned, the rubber meets the road. That's the important part. Without a strong school system, we're not going to have a strong community. That's absolutely bottom line. And the other big chunk comes from Annapolis. So we need to be able to not only communicate with our delegation that goes to Annapolis, we need delegates and a state senator who are willing to work for us to get money for our schools from the state. And that's another difficult job, to get money to come to Carroll County, because Carroll County is hard to believe that we are considered a wealthy county, but we are.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Whistler?
Thank you so much. Again, the budget issue is one of the major functions of our Board of Education. They do determine where funds go in large part. But as Mr. Miller mentioned, 88% of our operating budget's already consumed with salaries, pensions, and employee group contracts. 12% is not enough. And Kerwin has been very unfair to our teachers. The salaries haven't been able to go up because of the unfair Kerwin formula. The fact that we only get 34 cents of every dollar sent to Annapolis, and only half of the 34 cents is used for education. Blueprint won't be kind to us either. I talked to budget folks within the the education team here, and we don't have schools that underperform. Our schools overperform. We only have 1 or 2 Title I schools. Right now, we are projected to be 24 of 24 jurisdictions as far as funding per pupil. We are at the bottom of the pile for funding. Most of the money is going to go to PG County, Baltimore City, Montgomery County. We have major issues ahead. Teacher salaries going up to $67,000. Pre-K in our schools. Many challenges are ahead, and our board needs to have the understanding and the expertise to figure out where money's got to go and do it right. The capital budget doesn't address all of our needs, but I have a great relationship with our elected officials, and I'm endorsed by our state delegation and all of our incoming commissioners, and I'm going to work with them for our schools.
Thank you. Mrs. Battaglia?
Excuse me. Over the past almost 4 years, I've been working with the county commissioners, our local delegation, and senators to continue to advocate for more funding. I've always advocated for at least 50% of the county budget to go to school system. Excuse me. That is really important to me. We're one of the biggest employers in the county. We are, in essence, creating a product that is going to be going out into the workforce into the county and contributing to the tax base. So we do need to continue to have the quarterly meetings we currently have with the county commissioners. We need to continue having the yearly meetings with the delegates and the senators and letting them know what we need on the county end. Delegates and senators have been extremely helpful to send letters to Annapolis on our behalf, advocating for what we need to do here in Carroll County. We always hear about the funding, and it's always been one of the unfortunate parts. We can partner with different organizations to help alleviate and help with some of the things we need help with, whether it's Together We Own It or the Carroll Arts Center. So those type of things are always helpful too, but I still will continue to advocate for at least 50% of the county budget with the county commissioners.
Thank you, Ms. Battaglia. Dr. Dorsey?
I think we need to continue our collaborative sessions that we have with our county commissioners and our state delegation. And as a board, we need to make sure that we're sharing the realistic needs of the system. And again, we can show evidence-based support of why we're asking for what we're asking for. And again, we just need to make sure that we're persistent and that we're realistic. And I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is not to become argumentative or overly defensive, but to realistically share what the picture is as far as our needs in the school system. We all know that we have limited resources, and as a county, I think we've done a great job of maximizing the use of the resources that we've been given. And in one sense, it is like a double-edged sword, because we've made great use of the resources that we've been given, and it looks like, okay, well, if you're doing that with what you've been given, why do you need to ask for more? But really, we need to make sure that we're asking for the realistic budget that we need to have to fund our programs here in the system. So again, the collaborative sessions we need to continue, and as a board, we need to make sure that we're realistically sharing what our needs are.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. We will now move on to question 4. Due to reoccurring violent events in schools across the country, Carroll County Public Schools has taken an active approach in strengthening school security by taking all the appropriate steps needed to abide by the Maryland Safe to Learn Act. In addition to the requirements of the Maryland Safe to Learn Act, what other actions, if any, would you take as a Board of Education member to keep our students safe, and how would you communicate these actions to the community, parents, teachers, and students? This question will begin with Mr. Miller.
Thank you. I want to say, I went back to last question when I said the two things we should fund is education and public safety. I think Sheriff DeWeese does a fantastic job in Carroll County. I think having the resource officers at the schools and is obviously step one and the most important thing to me. What can we do more in terms of ensuring safety in our schools and our community and communication? I think when it comes to safety, it starts with kindness. I think we go back to ensuring that our students, have a place where they can go to school, and if there's bullying that's occurring, if there's things that they see that are going on, that they're not afraid to speak out. They're not afraid to tell somebody and bring it to somebody's attention. I think a lot of times when it comes to student violence, you look and you see it's not something that happens overnight. It's usually a series of events that build up that essentially cause somebody to do something. So how can we get to that sooner? How can we intervene sooner in the process to ensure that students who may be struggling, we're able to get to them? But again, I appreciate everything that our sheriff department does. I think we do a great job already with making sure there's a resource officer at every school. So from an immediate threat standpoint, I think we do a very good job. But let's look at the larger picture and how can we prevent it in the future by getting to these students sooner in the process.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Scanlon?
I agree with a lot of what I just heard there. Our school resource officer program is excellent. It is a model for the rest of the state. Those SRO officers, they are hand-selected, they're trained for their jobs, and they do a great job. They are welcome members of the school community. I've heard nothing but positive things. We have one in every high school, and then with the middle school and elementary, they have one for a middle school, and then they go to the feeder schools. So, a possibility we could expand that program. That is paid for by the county commissioners. It is not paid for by the school system. That culture of kindness is absolutely necessary. In a school, that is a culture that should be developed from the very beginning. And, we have different programs for that. The Sources of Strength program is a peer-to-peer program that will help, when people are having struggles, they can talk to each other. And the biggest piece, though, is the mental health. Because we know that the students who snap and have violent outbursts, there is a profile that we've identified, and these people have mental health problems, and if we can identify those mental health problems sooner, we could prevent some incidents from happening. The mental health in our school system, we don't have as many mental health therapists as we could use. We have the school counselors, and they do a great job, but there are some things that they're just not equipped to handle. And so we could definitely expand our mental health therapists.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Whistler?
Thank you so much. It's one of the pillars of my campaign, actually, is making sure that our kids are safe in schools. If they're not safe, they're not going to learn. And that goes for our staff as well. With me, there is no fine line between keeping our SROs in school. Our students need to have SROs in schools. They need to be in uniform. They need to be present. And I have the endorsement from our sheriff because, like him, I think we need to put SROs in our elementary schools. We need SROs in every single school. The military taught me to be proactive and prepared. And we must be proactive, not reactive in our schools. We need to have people there that will respond immediately to threats and not wait like we saw in Texas earlier this year. We need to harden our schools as well to make sure that it's difficult for folks to get in and harm our staff and students. I'm also concerned from a safety perspective about cybersecurity. I can't tell you as a teacher how many times I saw my elementary school students surfing porn sites on their computers at schools. Yes, it is happening. We have third graders at schools I taught at accessing these inappropriate sites on their computers. I'm also concerned about people accessing them through their computers when they're using school computers. So we need to make sure that we prevent that. And also, I'm very concerned about data collection. There's a lot of data collected on our children. I want to know why, where it's going, who's getting it, and we need to make sure that we protect our students at every level.
Thank you, Mr. Whistler. Mrs. Battaglia?
Everyone's kind of saying the same thing. Yeah, we have amazing partnerships with our SROs here in Carroll County. Sheriff DeWeese has done a phenomenal job with hand selecting the SROs in each of the schools that we have them in. We have amazing partnerships with all of our law enforcement agencies throughout the entire county and in every municipality. I hear from some elementary administrators that, they'll just happen to peek out the window and they'll see that one of the Westminster PD or Manchester PD or Hampstead PD, does a periodic drive-by and checks on everything. And they're always there, have a phone number if they need to call them immediately. One of the biggest issues we have is our bullying issues. And, even though we've passed a policy, Board of Ed members, we pass policies, but we also need help from the community and from our school community and from our staff and administrators to make sure those policies are followed. Our Sources of Strength program, phenomenal. I'm trained myself, so I think it's very important we continue those. Mindfulness rooms, we're almost over COVID here. Well, I hear apparently it's over, but our mindfulness rooms, let's get them back. Those were extremely helpful. Students really enjoyed having that space where they could go in and be able to take a deep breath, gather themselves, and get the help they need. And we need help from parents. We need our parents to make sure they're monitoring their children on what they say and do on social media, because it does go back into the schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Battaglia. Dr. Dorsey?
Certainly, school safety is a main priority. We need to make sure that all of our students and staff members are safe. I agree with some of the comments that have been made. We need to expand our security resource officers. It would be good to have a security resource officer in each of our schools. When I look at the system level, we have a supervisor, and then we have an assistant who's working with him, and I might have their titles wrong there, but again, we need to also increase that department centrally, because they're responsible for helping the schools be prepared for any kind of situation that might come up. So with all of the training that they have to do, it would be good if we had more hands on the ground in that department as a system level. When I look at the schools, I know that schools, we have our school safety committees and we have system level safety or security committees. But when I look at the schools, the main thing we need to do to help our students, all students, everyone should feel connected to someone in their schools. Our students should feel that there's someone they can go to if there's a situation or a problem that they want to discuss. And we need to make sure that schools have a handle on what their climates are like. We can do that through the student and staff surveys, and we can use that information to help us as we continue with our full school discipline programs that we offer.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. Dr. Jaskowski?
I was a freshman the year of the Columbine shooting, and which was one of the first major mass shootings in a public school that gained national attention. And I was also a resident advisor the year of the Virginia Tech shooting that occurred in a dormitory. And of course, most recently, the tragedy in Uvalde is still fresh in our minds. Now, as a professor and a parent, this is something that I think about every day. If you can see, I'm getting emotional about it because it's something I care so deeply about. I'm the only Board of Education candidate in Carroll County who is a gun sense candidate endorsed by Moms Demand Action and Every Town to End Gun Violence. I'm also the advisor for the new Students Demand Action chapter of Carroll County. But it's not just about smart gun control or limiting access. I'm aware of the constituency in Carroll County. Really, it's about addressing and preventing bullying, drug use, preventing this cycle of isolation and anger and classroom disruption, and that all leads to violence, and replacing that with a culture of belonging and support, making sure that students have access to safe adults to turn to for that support, and so also partnering with families and school resource officers, thinking about ways that we can increase safety related to social media and cybersecurity, and again, bullying. This also involves conducting comprehensive safety assessments in the schools and increasing mental health supports, which includes hiring more support staff and providing better training.
Thank you, Dr. Jaskowski. We're going to move into question number 5 now. Over the years, more and more teachers continue to leave Carroll County Public Schools for various reasons. How will you, as Board of Education member, plan on increasing teacher and administrator retention rates and or draw the best teachers to Carroll County? We will start with Mr. Scanlon.
Great question. There are a couple different aspects to this. Of course, salaries is one of the prime movers. When I started teaching, Carroll County's salaries were at the very bottom of the state. We've gradually moved up. We're now kind of in the middle. But the reality is a teacher in Carroll County can go to any surrounding county and make more money. But money is not the whole thing. There is the culture of the school system. And so we need to really make sure we have a school system that supports our educators, a school system that listens to our educators and makes sure that they feel valued. And as far as getting more teachers into our schools, in our high schools we have early childhood education programs. We have the Teaching Academy of Maryland program. It's very important that we continue to work with those, try to expand those programs. Carroll Community College has a teaching and education program. We need to partner with them. These future educators are the kind of people we want coming back to Carroll. I've worked over the years with many teachers who went to school here, left and came back because they wanted to be here. We need to continue that. That is so important. And finally, I am committed to sitting down and listening to these educators,
Please
and
finish
listening to
your
what they
thought.
have to say.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Whistler?
Yeah, again, as a former teacher, I have firsthand experience why teachers come and go, in addition to talking to many teachers during the campaign. I think it's already been mentioned, but the first thing is respect. Our teachers need to be respected. They do so much for our students. And we need to make sure that we're not micromanaging them, that we're not looking over their shoulder, that we're not ready to pounce on them if they make a mistake. We need to let them teach their craft. And we need to also give principals and teachers the ability to deal with unruly students and make sure that we have a great learning environment. I taught in a system where suspension and removal of students from class was discouraged. That is a recipe for disaster. I don't want our principals to be judged on suspension rates or disciplinary issues. I want them to be reasonable, but I want them to have the leverage to do what they need to do. I also want to make sure that we decrease testing. We do a lot of testing, and a lot of it is unnecessary. We need to make sure we have metrics in place and gather those metrics, but we need to look at decreasing the testing when needed. We need to make sure we have good class sizes for our teachers. Redistricting needs to be looked at. We can't just kick this can down the street. Our class sizes are getting bigger, and we need to look at it and make sure we have good class sizes. And above all, we need to wrap services around our teachers so they can focus on education, and instructional assistants and special educators can help them accomplish their mission.
Thank you, Mr. Whistler. Mrs. Battaglia?
So one of the great things about Carroll County Public Schools is we work with what we have. We can advocate all day long and go across the street to the county commissioners and say, we need more funding, and prove to them why we need more funding. But if the money's not there, we can't do anything. Our hands are tied. But that's what's so great about CCPS is because we do work with what we have, and we make things stretch, and it makes things harder, but it makes things work. Another thing I keep hearing, regarding educators leaving is social media, a lack of parent involvement in their kids' education, behaviors in the classroom. That's been a big one lately. So, and unfortunately, there's laws that are passed federal and statewide that unfortunately restrict teachers for what they can and can't do regarding a student that might be misbehaving in a classroom. Testing, yes, again, that's another stressor on our teachers. And unfortunately, some of that, again, is state mandated. So some of those things we have no control over as a Board of Ed. But we do, and I can tell, every time it has come to the table to, raises, bonuses I voted yes for because I know our teachers are working so hard and they do deserve to be paid properly. And I wish we had the money for it to give them the competitive salaries as another county that pays them a heck of a lot more.
Thank you, Mrs. Battaglia. Dr. Dorsey?
Well, as a board, we certainly must show respect to our teachers and administrators and all of the staff members who are working on behalf of our students. There should not be anyone in our system who doesn't feel supported or respected by the school board. So that's first and foremost. We need to show respect. And then when I think about the question about increasing the teacher and administrator retention rates, one of the things that we do or have done in our HR department is that for staff members who are leaving our system, they are invited to complete an exit survey. So we need to take a look at the exit surveys to see why our staff members are leaving. We need to study and see if there are any trends that are prevalent and see if there are things that we need to do concerning that data and how we can change that. Certainly, we need to make sure that we're offering competitive salaries to our staff members. But as it's been said, we know that salaries are important, and we know that when teachers have a heart for teaching, they have a heart for teaching, and we certainly want to make sure that we, as a system, are providing them with competitive salaries and acknowledging them for doing their part to help our students learn. So respect is the foremost thing that comes to mind, and the other items that I mentioned, looking at the data as they leave.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. Dr. Jaskowski?
Thank you for this question. In the previous discussion of funding, you asked about the relationship of funding with student academic success, and I think most of us didn't get to that second piece of the question. But we know that well-supported educators are directly related to student performance. Support for educators and respect for educators has been a cornerstone of my campaign, and I've spoken a lot about it. I've talked about how I would be advocating for making up the missed salary steps, for following the blueprint, to increase support staff, to prioritize diverse hires, to increase opportunities for leadership, and to provide more and effective training. But I wanted to talk a little bit specifically about support professionals. The Maryland State Education Association legal team recently released a statement on the excess workload of these critical employees of our school system and the importance of their work. We need to act to decrease the unrealistic work expectations on our support professionals and improve wages and compensation for them. This includes collective bargaining, but it also includes working with the school board to advocate for funding and improved messaging so that the community actually understands the role of education support professionals who are critically necessary for teachers to do their job in the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Jaskowski. Mr. Miller?
All right. So first on teacher retention, I want to say, Carroll County has done a phenomenal job over the years. I know the question, the way it's phrased, teachers continue more and more to leave Carroll County. Our teacher attrition rate over the last 5 years is actually below the state average. So we're a little below the state average. With that being said, also we had in the last 4 education years, start of school, we had the lowest number of vacant positions 3 out of those 4 years. So teachers are coming to Carroll County. With that said, the last part of your question, how do we get the best teachers? I believe we have the best teachers, and I want to thank all our teachers that we currently have now who are coming in every day and educating our students, doing their job to the best they can. So, but with that said, I hear everybody talking about pay or talking about bringing in additional teachers or additional resources, which cost money. We got to keep in mind that we've talked in nauseum about the lack of funding in Carroll County Public Schools to pay teachers. Yet everybody up here is talking about how they're going to get more pay or bring in more professionals. I'm probably the only one who has said this and was willing to say it. I will not promise you that on day one I'm going to be able to do that for our teachers or I'm going to be able to bring in more staff, because without additional funding from our commissioners, it is not possible. So I don't want anybody to think that this is a snap and it happens. It's going to take time, but I want to thank all the great teachers we have already, because I do think we have the best in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. All right, we will now move on to question 6. As the school system becomes more diverse, how do you plan on building a culture of respect, unity, and kindness through policies and initiatives to create a school system that is more inclusive and equitable? This question will begin with Mr. Whistler.
Thanks for that question. I actually taught 4 years full-time in Baltimore County, one of the most diverse populations of students and staff, and so I have a little bit of experience in this. It is so important that we have a top-down perspective on ensuring that we treat everyone fairly, that we have an environment of political neutrality, that we're not putting one student over the other, but we're respecting one another. I know as a teacher, I tried to model kindness and respect all the time, and that's one of the things that we must insist we do from the top down. It is really important that we make everyone feel welcome, that we make sure that we give every single student the accommodations they need to succeed. I'm the parent of a special needs child myself, and it was very, very important to me as a parent to make sure that my child had the accommodations needed to succeed in school. And so it's really important that we have good policies that ensure neutrality, ensure kindness, ensure respect. But as a board member, I want to make sure we have systems in place for folks to file grievances when they feel like it has not been fair to them, when their child has been bullied, when administrators or teachers don't solve the problem. And as a board, we have that responsibility to make sure that the system is doing everything it can to make every single student feel safe
Please finish your thought.
and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Whistler. Mrs. Battaglia?
So obviously, you know, when I think back to when my youngest was in kindergarten, one of the biggest things was everyone is friends here. The problem is I don't know when that stopped. We look at our kids and we start seeing that there's all this division and hate and things that are said about individuals, and even adults do it, unfortunately. But I don't know at what age that kindness stopped. Yes, absolutely, we need to teach about different cultures and learn to celebrate each other, practice mindfulness, and continue our sources of strength programs, and just learn to be respectful of each other's differences, our ideas, our thoughts, instead of hate towards one another. And the sad thing is, even here in this very room, there's adults who are guilty of it. So we also need to start with us as adults. Us as adults need to make sure that we are setting an example for our children. And that's where it needs to begin again, I think. But we also need to keep in mind with our kids, everyone deserves respect, to feel loved, to feel included. You may not agree with somebody, and that's okay. And it's okay to say, I don't agree. But we need to get back to being kind.
Thank you, Mrs. Battaglia. Dr. Dorsey?
I think what we need to do is continue our work on equity. As a system, we have a policy. We need to make sure that we're following our policy. And really, educational equity in Maryland, according to our MABE, really means that we're providing access to the essential academic, social, emotional, and economic supports so that each of our students can be involved in rigorous instruction and that they get the educational resources that they need. One of the things that I think we can do as board members, we have a lens, we call it an equity lens. If we can use this equity lens on a regular basis, I think that will help us as we begin to create a more inclusive, equitable environment for our students. Just a few of the things that we look at. We want to know who are the underrepresented groups. As we're creating these policies, who are the underrepresented groups that are going to be affected? And we need to have some dialogue about that and make sure that we continue to go through the other questions that are part of the equity lens to make sure that we're providing for each of our students. Another thing that we can do, and we're doing it now, we look at our data, not just for the full school data, but we begin to look at it based on our subgroups to see how equitably we are moving along with each of our students being successful.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. Dr. Jaskowski?
I think keeping discussions about diversity and equity, which are not political, out of the classroom doesn't protect children from conflict. I think teachers who are trained to lead sensitive, thoughtful discussions of complex issues should be some of the best people to do this. I hear students talk about how they just want to feel safe and free to go to school as themselves, free from worrying about bullying, and in a space that supports their learning and their well-being. I hear them talk about safety online and from fights and sexual harassment, from drugs and gun violence, that these are important to you and should be of concern to the schools. I hear you when you say that symbols such as flags not being allowed means that you have decided, or that the school system has decided, who is worthy of feeling safe and comfortable. I think it's inherently racist and homophobic to say that we shouldn't allow symbols of celebration of these groups. And one of my first actions would be to immediately repeal the flag policy and to revisit the political neutrality policy as well if I'm elected to the board.
Thank you, Dr. Jaskowski. Mr. Mailer?
So first I want to say I think it starts at home. And I think what I love about Carroll County and why I moved back here and why I'm running is I truly believe in our community. And I believe deep down, 99.9% of our community are really good at heart. And our children are too. So how can we bring that back into our classroom? If I'm being honest, the last 2 years of COVID really impacted our children. It impacted their development. It impacted them in a sense that they were staying inside, they weren't interacting with other peers. And some of them, it was in a very critical time in their life, socially and emotionally. But it goes back to giving our schools, our teachers, our administrators, the power and the ability to remove problems from the classroom. We need to go back to holding bullies accountable and not letting them off the hook. And it bothers me because it's not just our kids. I'm not an educator. I'm not a politician. I'm running for Board of Education because I care about our children. But I'm going to say this now, that our community, for some reason, over the last 6 to 9 months, has gotten so divisive, and it's showing on social media and it's showing in our classrooms. If we can go back to being good, kind people at heart at home, it's going to filter down to our children.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Scanlon?
Yeah, we do hear a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's become kind of a point of contention somehow. But diversity is recognizing and valuing differences in race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. And that's just the reality of our schools. We have children from all backgrounds. And inclusion is welcoming all these into our school environment and our school family, And as a public school, that's what we do. We take everybody, not just some. We take everybody. Then equity is being fair and impartial, and that's what is so important that we do in the classrooms. And equity is meeting every student where they are. In an educational setting, it's scaffolding your instruction to bring them up to the next level. I mean, that's what good teachers do every day. So, those should not be contentious. They should not be argumentative. As far as policies, it is something that needs to come from the top down, from the central office and the board, that we're going to embrace these things. And every school has to have that same culture. That, as I've said this one before, and I think Mr. Miller, this a culture of kindness is so important. So we have to keep that up.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. We will now move into our 2 randomly selected first speakers, starting with question 7. As mental health concerns and other special education needs have only been exacerbated due to the pandemic, how do you plan on diversifying and providing adequate mental health resources for all students? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you for this question. I think one of the things that most people may know me for is I was an advocate very early on in the pandemic for our children, and understanding that this ultimately was going to be the outcome if we close society to children at such a young age, a vulnerable point in their life. So I worked with our commissioners, and Carroll County was the only county to have rec sports open the first spring after the pandemic. We were the only county to have rec sports open the winter after the pandemic. And we're the only county to have rec sports open the spring after the pandemic. Our kids got a head start, but not everybody came out of the pandemic, obviously, on the good side, I'll just say. So how do we help this? I think our educators are front line. I think our teachers see our students every day. Some of them spend more time with your children than we even do, especially if, you're at work and you come home late. Sometimes teachers see your kids longer than you do. Being in the front lines, I think it's important that they let the professionals in the education system, starting with the counselors, know when they see a child in need and get to them early. And then let's find programs within the community, within the schools, to help those kids who are suffering. The coming out of the pandemic, it was a 2-year pandemic, a year and a half for schools and having a not normal school. It's going to take time, and we just have to be there for our children. But I'm going to urge our teachers, and I think they're great, I've said it before, to continue to be that front line and just make sure that the professionals know when a student needs help.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Scanlon?
Yeah, in a perfect world, we would not have to worry about the mental health issues of our students in the schools, but we do not live in a perfect world. As we all know, that mental health and behavioral issues have been on the rise, and it has created great stress in our schools, stress for our educators, stress for our parents. That's the reality that we live in. And I know a lot of what I'm going to say has to do with more resources, money, that we just talked about how we don't have the money for. So in Carroll County, we have 9 mental health therapists. 6 of them deal with the best programs in a few schools. The other 3 deal with the rest of the county, but only with students with IEPs. So I had a son with pretty severe mental health issues when he was in school. And the schools did not have the resources to deal with them. And, and really schools, you shouldn't have to deal with that kind of thing. I mean, that's not what our job description says, but it's the reality. Many families do not have the resources to get mental health help for their kids. It's just a fact, and in our schools, it is the school counselor's job. If you're a regular ed student, it is the school counselors, and they do a great job. I mean, no question about it. But for some, it's just not enough.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Whistler?
Thank you. Mr. Scanlon kind of outlined pretty well the situation facing our county. We really don't have adequate resources to address all the issues that we experienced. The pandemic really exacerbated and magnified the problems that we have across our student population, and not just students, but staff. And so the mental health issues should be something that the board really talks about and addresses over the next, actually immediately. And hopefully Blueprint will give us funding, but I'm not confident of that. But we do need to leverage our community resources. We have a lot of resources in the community that our schools and principals already leverage. We need to rely on them even more. Our nonprofits, county and state resources. And I also would like to see our teachers and staff get greater education on how to recognize kids in distress. Do they understand and know the signs of children that are in distress? Can we convince our teachers to create even stronger partnerships with parents to make sure that we know what's going on in kids' lives at home? Because as a teacher, I saw many kids come to school, and almost every single disciplinary issue resulted back to what was going on at home. And honestly, I'm very concerned and curious how we used our COVID funding to address this issue, and if we can access any more COVID funds now to address these serious mental health challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Whistler. Mrs. Battaglia?
So before COVID hit, CCPS was actually in the budget to hire more mental health services. And then, of course, we had COVID, and that all kind of had to sit aside. Now there's not the money for that. Regarding COVID funding, there really isn't any more COVID funding. There is no more. So whatever CCPS did receive, it was allocated, and there is documentation showing where all that funding went, but there is no more COVID funding for mental health services. SOS training, our sources of strength, yet that is an incredible resource that we have. Like I said, myself, I'm SOS trained, and many of our teachers and staff are SOS trained as well, identifying trauma. Professional development, I would love for our teachers to have more time for professional development, but there's not enough time. There's only so many days that our staff is available to work and to be there in our community and for our students. Navigating the Waters was a program that I brought forth when Mr. Anderson was here, so I'm very thankful that program was implemented into our Carroll County Public Schools. It's an annual event. We bring all of our resources in together in one place so parents can come and see what we have to offer here in the county. Youth Service Bureau is an incredible resource that we have. So we just need to make sure we're identifying the students, we have the training,
Please finish your thought.
and that we're getting everything we can possibly with our partnerships.
Thank you, Mrs. Battaglia. Dr. Dorsey?
We certainly need to continue making use of our school counselors, and I certainly agree that they do a wonderful job as far as providing resources for our students. And we also have our school support teams, which would include our pupil personnel workers, administrators, and counselors, and teachers as they work together to sort of address some of the needs of the students. We also need to extend to the community partnerships that we have to help in this area as well. But I think we need to, rather than looking at some things that we can do in the short term, we need to also try to develop a unified, comprehensive, and equitable system so that we can begin to address the barriers that there are to teaching and learning. I talked about students needing to feel engaged or connected with others in the school. So we need to look at re-engaging our students who are disconnected and to re-engage their families as well. So again, as we work toward this more unified, comprehensive, equitable approach, I think it will give us some systems to have in place on a long-term basis to help our students with their mental health. And again, it has to be embedded as we begin to move forward with our schools and their changes.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. Dr. Jaskowski?
Yes, so you've certainly heard that mental health are a major concern and interest to, I think, all of the candidates here. Mental health concerns are actually the #1 disability category at the university level, and very soon to be the case in the public school system as well. It's also important to note that students receiving special education are at increased risk for learning loss and mental health concerns, as well as other types of diverse learners, so those who are gifted and talented, speakers of other languages, and so forth, all at increased risk for additional mental health concerns on top of the risk that all students are currently facing. I really like Dr. Dorsey's systemic approach to equity, thinking about what we can do at a systems level to create change and reduce barriers. We've talked about decreasing workload, increasing professional development and training. I do actually think that the blueprint will provide for fewer direct instruction hours, and hopefully that gives educators some flexibility for more of that types of training. But we also do need more staff to provide individualized supports. When students have individual supports, which also includes decreasing overcrowding and class sizes, that limits practices such as restraint and seclusion, and helps improve the culture of belonging and kindness that we've all been speaking about. My top priority, if elected, is student achievement, and I really think that this mental health piece is so critical and tied to students being able to succeed in the school system.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Jaskowski. We will now move into the 8th and final question of tonight. Given the various issues students face, what do you believe the greatest challenge is, and how do you plan to address it while also incorporating student voice? This question will begin with Mr. Whistler.
I've said many, many times, the greatest challenge I think facing our school system today is addressing learning loss. Our students still are way behind. It's very concerning to me that the state refuses to release the data because I'm fearful that it will show huge backsliding with regard to student achievement across the state. But I will wager now that I think our Carroll County numbers will not be as tragic as other counties across the state, because our board did the right thing in getting our students back in classes as soon as possible. There's no mistake about it. Virtual learning is great, but we need to make sure our children are in those classrooms learning. We need to wrap our teachers with so many services if possible: special educators, instructional assistants. We need to let educators focus on teaching and increasing rigor, and we need to make sure that we have adequate resources set aside to take those students that need interventions off to the side for remedial teaching when it has to happen. But that is the greatest challenge we have. And we have to also leverage our business community for extended learning opportunities, after-school tutoring options. We have to make sure that our students can access, if needed, somebody virtually when they're sick, when they're ill, when they're home hospital care. But we need to make sure that we have contingencies in place to address learning loss, and we need to address it now.
Thank you, Mr. Whistler. Mrs. Battaglia?
I know for some it's not a popular topic, but I believe it's social emotional learning. A lot of our students, social-wise, it's making sure they feel accepted, they feel valued, they feel appreciated, and that is something any student can go through. And that's been going on for as long as I can remember. I graduated in 1996, and I can tell you I went through the same thing in high school. I wasn't accepted. I wasn't valued by other peers. I was bullied. I was harassed. I was short. I didn't grow until my 20s. And unfortunately, it continues to trickle on generation after generation after generation. Social media does not help. Social media, I think, is one of the biggest drives in what is happening right now on our students and how they feel, everything that they're going through. So our students need to feel valued, and they need to feel accepted, that it's okay to have purple hair. I wish I could have purple hair. It's okay to dress a little different. It's okay to wear a different pair of shoes. It's okay to love who you love. It's just about having the acceptance. And that needs to continue. And then, like I said, that's been going on for a long time, and I think that's one of the biggest issues with our students.
Thank you, Mrs. Battaglia.
You're welcome.
Dr. Dorsey?
Thank you. And again, there are certainly various student issues that are out there. At this point, though, the most pressing that I think that's facing us as a school system is enhancing our students' achievement. Because with all the things that students have to deal with, again, our primary function as a school system is to engage each student in rigorous instruction and to make sure they have access to their academic, social, emotional, and economic supports. And we have to be concerned about their performance. Not saying that we don't pay attention to all of the other issues that we've talked about tonight and the others that students are facing, but again, we need to make sure that our students get back to strong academics. And I know it's been a while since we've actually had performance data through the state, but we're going to soon be receiving that. We're going to certainly go through with our testing program this year, and we'll be getting data. So we need to make sure that our students are tuned in to their academic performance, and if they're pursuing career and technology goals, we need to make sure that they're very tuned into those as well. Whatever pathway they're involved in, we need to make sure that they're focused on those things. So again, I think it certainly is a challenge, but again, we want to make sure that we're getting back to teaching and learning and student achievement.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. Dr. Jakowski?
Yes, I agree. Teaching and learning is really what it's about. At the core, student achievement, as many of us have said, are directly related to supporting all learners and all educators to do their jobs, to feel safe and valued, and to be trusted and respected. We also know that having high expectations and accountability in education, it's called the Pygmalion effect, students will rise to the challenge. And so we do need to bring back those expectations and that accountability. It also goes beyond academics, and this includes real-world skills, those types of skills that I get to teach as an occupational therapist, so that social-emotional learning, the problem-solving, critical thinking, ethics, creative and flexible thinking, so that students can understand the complex problems of today and be prepared for joining society as full citizens. I think that students demonstrate their learning in different ways, and so we need to meet them where they're at, but then also help scaffold to push them to the next level and give them the support that they need to rise to the challenge.
Thank you, Dr. Jiskowski. Mr. Mailer?
Thank you for that question. I think it's funny, a bunch of adults up here trying to pretend that we know all the challenges of teenage kids or what they're facing day to day. But I'll say, I think there's a lot of pressure on our kids these days. The amount of testing that we do in schools, we came out of a pandemic, and the first thing we did to our students is test them to see where they were out of the pandemic. How crazy is that? It's the first thing we did was test them. And we're I didn't understand it. But with that aside, I think this right here, social media. The pressure that kids feel these days to be perfect because of what they see on here. The pressure they feel when they go to school and they know that when they leave school, they're not going to escape any of their bullies. They're not going to escape any of the pressure because of this right here. So we put a bunch of pressure on, we test them. Then we tell them they got to live a perfect life because of what they see on social media. And then we say, and you're bullying in school, guess what? We're not going to do anything about it, and you're going to have to face them when you get home because of social media. One thing I would like to do if elected, I would like to get these back out of the classroom. I don't know how many people here went to high school and was allowed to bring this to school. I know phones were around when I was in high school. If this came out, the teacher took it. They took it. Nowadays, if a teacher tries to take this, the parent calls the school and says, you don't have a right to my son's or daughter's property. Get these back out of the school. Let's let our kids be kids, okay? Let them go to school. Let them learn, okay? And not have to worry about this all the time.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Scanlon?
Okay, well, the question was about the challenges students face. And I think for me, I see that you guys face an incredibly complex world. Our country is more diverse. Workplaces and jobs have evolved over the years. Our country is divided by politics. Don't even think about climate change. So you have to make huge decisions. You have to decide, are you going to go to college, join the military? What kind of a career are you looking for? So that uncertainty of the future, I think, is the biggest challenge that you face. And our job as a school system is to help you make those right decisions for your future. And that includes a rigorous academic school year, but it also includes, as I mentioned at the very beginning, extracurricular activities to address the whole person. So it's not just academics; that's a huge part, but giving students options to explore while you're in school. What kind of a career might you want? Because guarantee most people change their mind. People change their college majors. So you just, for us to give you that experience so you can choose your future and move on with your life is what we need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Thank you all very much. That concludes the question and answer session of tonight's forum. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes to give a closing statement. We will start with Mrs. Battaglia and work our way this way.
Again, I would like to thank SGA for holding the forum. I think it is very important. The students get to hear, as well as the public, where the candidates for Board of Ed stand on certain topics, and I think it's very important, and I appreciate the opportunity. Moving on from COVID, I'm very glad of the fact that I've been part of the modernization project for Career and Technology Center to offer more opportunities and more space for our students to advance into their careers and potential college looking forward into their future. I'm happy to be part of the replacement of East Middle School to keep it here in Westminster City where it is needed for the community. We have so much to be thankful for here at CCPS, and I'm glad to have been part of it for the past 4 years. I'm thankful for all of our teachers and our staff here in central office as well for everything that they have done the past 3.5 years to make sure our students are getting what they need in order to move forward in life. It's not easy. society gets harder. But we also need to keep in mind that as we move forward from COVID and we try to get our students back on track with learning loss, that we need to keep in mind that everyone does deal with situations, learning and other social aspects differently. And we need to remember that everyone has an opinion, and we need to be respectful and learn not to be hateful towards others. And I do hope that I'm back here for another 4 years to make sure our students get everything that they need to move forward on in life. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Battaglia. Dr. Dorsey?
Okay, many thanks again to Ms. Zhang and Ms. Tedeschi for serving as our moderators this evening. I thank the timekeeper and to all who helped make this CCSGA forum possible. I have always had a heart for teaching and learning. During my first term on the board, there was the emergence of a worldwide pandemic, which resulted in many disruptions to learning. We dealt with many issues, and I know that our students faced a learning loss academically because of the disruption of face-to-face learning. Students' mental health issues were also intensified. The primary governance role of the Board of Education is to ensure that every learner is provided multiple pathways and access to resources and opportunities for success. As we move forward, we have to focus on our students' achievement. I am seeking a second term on the board to use my knowledge and skills to increase student achievement and provide opportunities for students to be successful. My top priorities are to ensure that each student, again, is provided pathways and opportunities for success, to retain and recruit quality teachers and staff to enhance a diverse workforce, to ensure that our staff salaries are competitive, and to support implementation of the blueprint for Maryland's future. And I know there are parts of the blueprint that are quite exciting when I look at how we are hoping to redesign our schools where they become places where our teachers are treated as professionals and they're given a system of supports and incentives. So again, there are some great parts of the blueprint, and I look forward to helping to implement it here in Carroll County. So I would appreciate a vote for Patricia Ann Dorsey for the Board of Education. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. Dr. Jaskowski?
Thank you once again, Emily and Nikki and all the students that supplied questions today. I think the opportunity to participate in this conversation is so important. I want you first and foremost to know that I care and I'm qualified and I am ready to help take on the task of being on the Board of Education. The thing is, I have zero aspirations of any higher office beyond the Board of Education, and that is because I believe education to be the highest calling. As an educator and a potential board member, I would be able to have a lasting impact on the school system and my community, my own children, and all of you, the future leaders of our community. I want you to know that I'm an educator, I'm a parent, I'm an ally, I'm a clinician. I will advocate for you. I will advocate for your children. I will advocate for the educators and the school system employees and fight for the best interests of our community. I look forward to continuing this conversation with you. I applaud you for taking part in it. I hope to see you at many upcoming events, and I wish you all the best in the school year.
Thank you, Dr. Jaskowski. Mr. Miller?
Thank you. I had to smile, Dr. Jaskowski. That's my line. I don't want to be a politician either.
No interest.
Actually, I want to thank everybody, obviously, for coming tonight. But I want to say that I think we have challenges ahead of us. We talked about learning loss. We talked about it all tonight. But why am I running? I'm running because I care about our students, and I believe every decision we make as a board needs to have students first. Every decision we make has to put our children first. I honestly think over the last 2 years, a lot of decisions that were made really didn't take into consideration of the impact it would have on our children. We heard over and over, kids are resilient, they'll be fine, kids are resilient. And we're coming to learn they're not as resilient as we thought. Really, that was just an excuse for adults to do what they thought was best and not have to shoulder the burden. Never again will I allow our kids to shoulder a burden of protection for society. Never again will we ask our children to take a back seat while the rest of us figure out a way forward. I also want to say, I truly, when I say it, I love this community. I grew up here, convinced my wife from Pennsylvania to move back here to raise our children for the school system. And what I want everybody to know is I don't think we have to change. I don't think Carroll County has to change. You hear it a lot. You'll hear people say, well, we need to change. We don't need to change. I think there's work ahead. I think we can come together a little bit better, but we don't have to change. We are Carroll County. We are who we are. What I would like to see is a board who's willing to push back against the state trying to make us change, trying to make us conform to something that they want us to be as opposed to who we are as a community. Because I do believe, like I said before, deep down, I believe everybody within this community, everyone I've met, everyone I know who's grown up here are great people. And I believe in our community, I believe in our schools, and I hope we can come back together. And when this race is over, hopefully I've earned your vote. Hopefully you vote for me. But when it's over, hopefully we can come back together as a community.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Scanlon?
Well, thanks again for hosting this forum. There's a theme here. I'm not a politician, and a setting like this is really out of my comfort zone. Yeah, I can play music in front of an audience just fine, but when asked thoughtful questions, I like to have the time to really think it all through. That's what being on a board is all about, considering all the implications and engaging in dialogue with the other members, because no one person has all the answers. I did not become a teacher until I was in my 30s. I worked in the private sector. And as cliche as this may sound, I knew that I wanted to devote my life to something more important than just getting a paycheck. In high school, I had 2 English teachers who had a tremendous impact on me. Mr. Link knew how to relate to us as people. Sure, we read books and wrote papers, but the personal connection we had was what I valued. And Mr. Pinson was just the opposite. He had high expectations, and you wanted to meet those expectations. And it wasn't until then that you got to see his sense of humor and find out who he really was. And I never consciously tried to emulate those teachers, but in retrospect, I can see I embraced those 2 approaches. And as a school system, we absolutely must stay focused on academics, which includes the arts, world languages, special education, agri-science, business, career tech. The list could go on. And these are all vital for your success. But we can't lose sight of who each of you is as a person. You will each have to find your own path forward. You need to be problem solvers, you need to be creative, you need to be critical thinkers and readers, you need to be able to communicate effectively, you need to be able to work with others. As a Board of Education, it is our job to help you get there as best we can. Yes, we have to deal with a lot of nuts and bolts like budgets and contracts and Maryland state standards. But my heart is with you, the students. That's how I spent my career, and that's why I am running for the Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Whistler?
Thank you again, ladies, for hosting this great debate. And again, it's really important that we remember you are the customer. You're the reason we do everything we do in schools. We have one of the best performing systems in the state, and we need to be proud of that. I'm so proud of our students and teachers for everything they do. I'm glad that everyone is taking time to learn about the candidates running for office, because I think we're at a critical crossroads in education in our county. It's important that everyone, even those without students in the system, vote in the upcoming election. There's so much at stake, and I'm glad everyone is seeing what's going on in our classrooms, and they're taking note. Our next board will have so much to say with our curriculum, our policies, and the values our children will be taught now and far into the future. There's 3 reasons why I'm running. First, parents must always have a voice. We must do everything we can to strengthen teacher-parent partnerships. We must continue to rank in the top 5 statewide for math, science, and ELA. Other counties wonder how our amazing teachers do so much with so little, and I don't want to change any of that. I just want to give them more if we can. Second, I want to make sure we stick to the basics. There's only so many hours in the school day to teach our students what they need to be college and career ready. We must keep inappropriate concepts and topics away from our kids, and parents should always have the say in what is presented. And finally, our schools need to always stay safe, accessible, and open. Every child, no matter their background or preference, needs to get the best education possible. And as a parent of a special needs child, I'll make sure that every student is given every accommodation they need to succeed. I think I have a variety of skills and perspectives we need on the Board of Education. And I'm going to use all of those life experiences to make sure we work hard for you. So to every parent, staff member, and taxpayer, I'll give this job everything I have. I'm fully committed to keeping our schools great, and I ask for your
Please
vote.
finish. Thank you, Mr. Whistler.
Thank you. I would like to thank you all for attending tonight's Board of Education Candidate Forum. Your insight on current topics will help the voters of Carroll County make their important decision on November 8th. On behalf of the Carroll County Student Government Association, I would like to thank Channel 21 for the continuing support of the students in Carroll County, and I would like to thank you all for coming and watching tonight's forum. Thank you, and good evening.